Before I begin today, I'd like everyone present here to please stand up. Now, I'd like everyone who's ever felt nervous or anxious before doing something that you really wanted to, but just couldn't because of that feeling that pulled you back down, please take a small step forward. Wow, I love the number of people who just have the courage to accept it. Perfect. You'll know why I made you do this in just a few minutes. Please have a seat. Now I'd like to ask you if this is relatable. We live our lives chasing dreams, but yet sometimes we hear a whisper from within ourselves. We aren't capable. We aren't good enough. Maybe when you couldn't accomplish something that you wanted to. Maybe when you disappointed your parents. Or even when you were just going through your daily routine of late night overthinking. Most of us hesitate as if there's an invisible wall between us and the lives we truly desire. We usually imagine that the change towards achieving that requires a grand leap or a flawless plan. Relatable, right? And in case if it's not, trust me, you're one of the lucky ones. But for those of you who are like me and fit into the first category, I want to change that. I want this to be a reminder that there's more in store for you only if you're willing to seize it. And I learned this in the simplest possible way. 10 days before my 5th birthday, my mother asked me to invite everyone at a family gathering to my birthday party. It was one line. Everyone, please come to my birthday party on the 23rd of August. I had rehearsed it at least 100 times. I knew when I wanted to pause, when I wanted to smile, but when the moment came and my mom made me stand on that table, nothing came out of my mouth. Not a single word. I froze. I couldn't do it. And then, as usual, my mother had to say it for me. And at that young age, my parents learned something about me. Well, I've always been shy, but they realized that fear doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just quietly pulls you back from doing the things you have the potential to do. And as small as it may have seemed, was my first step in a journey I had just begun. They realized that some people are born confident, like my brother, who never needed to summon up the courage to speak. But for others like me, that wasn't always the case. Over the years, step by step, slowly and awkwardly, I was pushed to do things that often made me freeze, like speaking to new people. Gradually, that took me from being a class monitor in junior school to becoming a student council rep in middle school to becoming the student council president in my 2nd year of high school. Each of these things that I attempted doing made me feel like I was jumping into icy water. Shocking and uncomfortable at first, but then as time passed, it would just get a little better. With each of these things I attempted doing, my comfort zone stretched just a tiny bit. And then, after years of taking these tiny steps one by one, I found myself on a stage I could never imagine. Not just for me, honestly, but for my entire family. I delivered a speech in Hindi before 750 people, including ministers and dignitaries. It wasn't that it suddenly became fearless. It was the quiet steps that I kept taking that quietly prepared me to stand here. And while this journey might not sound as extravagant to my audience here today, I know that this is something that's going to remain significant in my journey. I truly believe that the jackpot can never be hit in such a journey, but you're always aiming towards it. My grandparents have always been my backbone, and sharing their experiences with me has been their way of imparting knowledge to me. My grandfather has always taught me life lessons, and my grandmother has always reminded me of my spiritual roots. On one such occasion, they gave me an analogy that always stuck with me. It's called Man Ka Mandir, or in other words, the temple of the mind. They taught me not just to treat my body as a temple, but also my mind. Let me narrate it for you. So think of a temple. Outside, there's the boundary wall. That's what marks the sacred space. That's where you make the decision whether to interact with someone or not, whether to initiate the conversation or simply just give them a smile. Then comes the courtyard. This is a space for formal interactions. This space marks professional situations. Then the temple stairs. This signifies the bridge between professional and personal decisions. Here's where the decisions don't only affect your career as a personal well-being, but also your personal well-being as an individual. And finally, the inner sanctum of the temple. Your mind, your true self, your soul. This is a space where everything stems from, where thoughts come alive, decisions are made, and emotions are created. But how does this analogy fit into the question anyways? It's basic human nature to filter our conversation and mask our intentions all the way. But all these things require one thing: taking certain steps that will pave the way for many more. And here's how I connected the dots. In order to understand the Man Ka Mandir better and how it relates to these basic situations, I conducted a survey of 100 people from all walks of life. First came the boundary wall. When they were asked why they hesitated to take first steps, first impressions, 46.5% said it was because of overthinking. 33.8% said it was because they sought perfection in that first interaction. And the rest, fear of judgment, fear of failure, and not knowing where to begin. Then came the courtyard. When they were asked to even read a chapter out in class, they were met with more roadblocks. 31% doubt, 31% pressure, and the rest, fear, anxiety, and indifference. Then came the temple stairs. Expressing emotions and starting something from start top the reasons of why they hesitated to confront the uncomfortable situations, like confrontations with a family member over the will of a loved one, or even starting a new business. And then the inner sanctum. All the reasons they gave to justify what was pulling them back down all boil down to this: I get excited but quickly overwhelmed, and I know I can do this, but I procrastinate anyways. That was it. The main reason why 100 people from all walks of life hesitated to take their first steps. But while it's good to know the root cause, why don't we look at the grass on the other side of the fence? What if you're someone who never hesitates? What if you're born with the natural ability to just dive in without a trace of fear or doubt or anxiety or any of those? Perhaps it's good to have our guard up, but sometimes we meet people who know how to strike the perfect chord. Or maybe we're the ones who find it difficult to be vulnerable with others, even if they're close friends. At these times, we need to remind ourselves that it's okay if we may seem picky. At the end of the day, it's about following your basic instinct. That gut feeling that tells you what's right or what's wrong. Because you know you better than anyone else does. And that's your superpower. So you may ask, what's the point of it all? And here's where I come back full circle. We are all master procrastinators to some degree. And we all feel a wave of emotions. But through it all comes back down to this: stepping outside your comfort zone begins with a single step. Well, now you know why I made you all take that single step at the beginning of my speech. Most of us here, you and me, have just taken our first step. That first step is that surge of dopamine, that extra push, and that helping hand that you'll need to get started. At the same time, it's not a slingshot, it's a small tug. And when you take your next single step, it won't feel as daunting. And eventually, you'll realize that you've reached the top of the staircase without any assistance. You'll realize it was all you, through all the doubt, through all the pressure, and through all the obstacles that came along your way. When I look back, I see a chain of steps. A young girl stepping onto a table to speak one sentence and failing miserably. A teenager stepping onto a classroom stage to run for council. And a young woman stepping onto a national stage to speak in a language she didn't fully command. Each of these things I attempted doing made me feel like I was doing nothing at that time. But each one built a new version of me, silently preparing me for the next. In the end, I realized that if we gain enough motivation to take that single step, the result of us doing so will keep motivating us to go forward. And maybe one day you'll find yourself exactly where you only once dreamed of being. And who knows, that single step might change your entire life. As I end, I'm reminded by a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. that seems most fitting. You don't have to see the entire staircase, just the first step. Thank you.